or this first should be called an exceptionally brief introduction to international law. And that's, it's going to be a roller coaster, quickly going through some particular areas to give you the fundamentals, the background, so you can understand the next courses. Some of you who've taken international law will understand it. The Islamic university students will already be very well versed in these issues, and so this might be very basic for you guys. But there are others who have never studied international law, and so it's important that we bring everybody to the same level as soon as we can, so that we get a very good debate going on for the further days that we have. So, just a quick overview. We'll be looking at some of the fundamental concepts of international law. Okay? Just the foundational concepts of international law that we need to understand the rest of it. Then we look at sources of international law. Where do we derive these rules and principles and whatever you want to call them? Where do we derive it from? What are the sources that we derive it from? Is it a constitution? Is it some other law? And what are the subjects of international law? Who do they apply to? Does international law apply to you and I as citizens of Pakistan? International law in action. How does international law actually impact us on a daily basis? Right? And you'd be surprised, there are things that you wouldn't have guessed, but international law is there, present, and has a huge impact. And then Pakistan international law. And some of these things, Pakistan international law, we're going to be looking at throughout this course. But right now, I'm just going to highlight some of these issues. So let's move on. What is law? How many of you are lawyers here? Raise your hand if you're a lawyer or a law student. Quick, while I'm young. Okay. Everyone who's a law student cannot answer this question. Alright? Only non-law students, I want you to give me an understanding of what is law.
Rights and duties of the individual.
Sorry?
Rights and duties of society.
Yeah, rights and duties of society. They're mentioned in laws. You'll have the Constitution, which gives you certain rights. It imposes certain obligations on individuals. Anyone else?
A framework of regulations that helps society to function, basically.
Absolutely. A framework of regulations, framework of rules that help society. Now I open this up to the lawyers. Anyone can answer this. If you give a worse answer than the non-lawyers, there will be something thrown at you. Alright, come on.
So something has already been established that our answers
Something
are
has been
matched.
established. You guys have done you set up a standard. Now, no answer.
Rights and duties which have been imposed by its sovereign, which has to be obeyed.
Yeah, multi-backward essentials.
Yeah.
You Austrian people. But yes, that's certainly one way of looking at it. And that's somewhat how we'll be looking at it here as well. But let's look at a textbook definition, a boring, old sock of a definition of law. Law may be defined as the body of official rules and regulations generally found in constitutions, legislation, judicial opinions, and the like, that is used to govern a society and to control the behavior of its members. Control the behavior of its members. That's a little nefarious, no? Exactly. That's a little scary. Control, but that's exactly what law is. When the law tells you, okay, an extreme example is the law tells you don't kill. That shaped my behavior, I'm not going to kill, right? I wouldn't have done that anyway because I'm a decent human being. But then there are more, particular instances. How to file tax returns. What font to use, no, they don't do that. But different things that the law tells you to do, right? And then they can affect your life in massive ways. Right? The law says from now on you will not walk on the left side of the road. Everybody's compelled. We have changed our behavior to now walk on the right side of the road. So it's a form of social control, a formal mechanism of social control. It's a very powerful tool. That's why you see a lot of politicians and people becoming president and prime minister who are all lawyers. Because that's part of the system, understanding the system of how to govern, how to control society. And that's why I became a lawyer, to control human beings. But it's empowering and can be abused, and we see this abuse, especially in totalitarian regimes, for example. I lived in Egypt, where Hosni Mubarak was president back then. And the way the law was used over there to suppress dissent, to look at, to perpetuate constitutions in Egypt or in the Middle East in general, are not there to assign you your rights, as they are maybe in Pakistan and the rest of the world. It's only used for one major function, that is succession. How does one government or one ruler go to the next ruler? So they're using law just to perpetuate their own system, right? This is one way of looking at it. This is how I view it, but everybody else has their other way. So law is a form of social control there. And these rules may be enforced through a sanction, through a penalty. And that's often how we see, the common man sees laws. But laws are a lot more complex. There's invalidity is another solution, which really isn't a punishment, but it's a form of, if you don't abide by the rules of a contract, it won't be valid. Right? So that's how it impacts you as well. So the law is there to shape social control. We're clear with this? You don't have a lot of questions on this? Simple, straightforward definition? Alright. Now, a really important concept when it comes to international law is sovereignty. So let's look at this definition. Sovereignty is the exclusive right to exercise supreme political authority. And from political authority, we also get legal authority. Because when you are the sovereign, you can make rules and laws. Over defined territory, land, airspace, and certain maritime areas such as territory, sea. And the people within that territory, that's fundamental, the people within that territory, you have control, political authority over them. No other state can have formal political authority within that state. So what we understand is that sovereignty is you've created a certain barrier within which you operate as the all power. Alright? There's nothing beyond you, or there's no other entity that makes that power. You are the fundamental source of that power. Therefore, sovereignty is closely associated with the concept of political independence. You cannot be dependent on someone because then that is the authority that makes the rules. Right? Now I put this icon over here, and this is, I think I play too many video games, and that's why you see those little icons show up, so I like it. So I thought I'd put them in my slides as well. But anyway, this is one of those concepts that you need to understand the rest of it. Baki sabak, right? I have to fill up an hour and a half, I don't have a choice. No, but this is fundamental. Understand this concept, because when it comes to international law, you're going to have to bring this, you're going to have to raise issues relating to this. For example, the issue of drone strikes on Pakistani territory is directly associated with sovereignty. Kulbhushan Yadav, Indian interference in Pakistan, for example, is directly related to the issue of sovereignty. This is our territory, we make the rules, we govern things. When you start interfering, that is issues of sovereignty. The OBL,
So-called surgical strikes,
yes,
hot pursuits.
exactly. Hot pursuits. Those are all issues of sovereignty because this is our line. Beyond this is our territory. You don't get to do anything beyond that. So that's why sovereignty is a very important concept. Now this icon thing, Mujay, just to give you a little more background. So I have a lot of problem making decisions, right? But now I'm a director of a think tank. So I kind of have to make decisions. So the best way is that I look at some of the options that I have, the rational options that I have before me, and then choose the best one. So I'll show you with regards to choosing that. I thought we'd take a light moment out. We would have gone bored by now. So the fundamentals of memory point icons. I call that a memory point. I thought maybe we could use this one. I don't know, I didn't like the lips, those were a little scary. It was a little distracting. I can't tell if this is a boy or a girl. Then I thought, how about this icon? It looks nice. It's got those colors and a little cybernetic, a little defaced. I didn't like that either. Then there was something disgusting like that. That was another option. And then this was completely weird, and I didn't choose that. In the end, we moved to that. It's just something on the side to kill time, really. But anyway, so we'll get back. Now, another memory icon that, memory point that needs to be looked at is statehood. How do you determine a state is a state? Because if it's not a state, it doesn't have a role to play in international law or international affairs even. So it's fundamental that we understand what a state is. All right. So there's the Montevideo Convention. There are other rules that writers have come up with. Some of the basic features, some of the basic characteristics are a permanent population. That's pretty easy, right? A defined territory, and simple, straightforward. A government. That's not always easy, because government has issues of capacity. How much can this government do, right? They would say that the Taliban government in Afghanistan, when it was time to give money out for the budget, they would take it out of a sanduk. There wasn't a banking system in place. Would it still be considered a government, right? And is that even a fundamental requirement to have a banking system in place? Is that part of what a government system is, a central bank? Anyway, these are questions. So a government is required. What exactly is a government? That's debatable. But something that is able to maintain authority or that issues sovereignty over a particular area. Is able to make rules and then enforce those rules. So that's what we can call a government. And then the capacity to enter into relations with other states. So you have some form of a foreign office, have enough capacity, enough individuals to engage with other countries. These are the 4 requirements mentioned in treaties and in documents. Some writers also said that it's not just the possession of these 4 requirements, you also have to be recognized by the rest of the world as an equal, as a partner, as a state. And that's where we get into issues of, say, the Afghan Taliban, for example. They were recognized by 2 countries. And that was an issue. They had all the other requirements, or arguably all the other requirements: defined territory, defined population, government. They could enforce their will wherever they wanted. They could enter into relations as they did with Pakistan. They had an ambassador here. But were they recognized? No, they weren't. Ahmed Shah Massoud and his Northern Alliance, they were recognized as the official government, and at one point only controlled 2 to 3% of Afghan territory, but they were considered the de jure government of Afghanistan. So these are issues which you need to keep in mind. What exactly is a state? Is the Palestinian Authority a state? Can we consider it a state? Right? So there's some fundamental requirements there. Let's move on. Now, what is this concept of sovereignty that we just discussed? Why is it important? Or how does it apply? If we look at it, it creates, frankly, a barrier, a shield, where the state, everything within it is controlled within it, but international law applies outside of it. Is that how we're going to view it? That's one way of looking at it. Unless the state itself opens the gates. If we're talking about Troy, it's about allowing the Urnos to come in. And it does it itself. This is a voluntary submission of your sovereignty. So when we say that drone strikes, we've allowed them, because we've allowed them to operate from a base in Pakistan, or we did at least. That was consent given there. Consular access. Nobody has a right to talk to a prisoner in your jail, but we have signed a treaty, and we have said that if he's a foreigner, we will allow the embassy officials or the consular officials to come and meet him in our jail. And this is what's the issue that's been raised in the Kulbhushan Yadav case, right? We agreed to the Vienna Convention on Consular Relations, which clearly defines the right for individuals who are arrested in another state to have their embassy officials come meet them to help arrange their legal defense, whatever. But in the end, we said no. What was the basis that we said no on? Anyone?
He's a terrorist.
He's a terrorist. Not you. So you said? He's a terrorist. Anyone else?
He was involved in the breach of sovereignty. Is that
Yes.
possible?
He was a spy.
Was a spy? But there's an agreement.
You can transfer information to the person, to the council.
Even in those cases, for example, spy cases between the USSR back then and the US, they would give consular access, right? Why have we denied it? What's the basis?
So in the case of Raymond Davis, we had a murderer get away. Raymond Davis, he murdered the Pakistani citizens.
He didn't get away. We didn't technically. I mean, if you actually look at the case, we denied him diplomatic immunity. The only reason he got away was because of the use of our laws, Qisas and Diyat laws, which say that you can pay compensation. Was there pressure applied? Probably. In fact, I'm pretty sure there was. But in the end, it was a function of our laws, domestic laws. The sovereignty wasn't really breached, unless you're talking about the arm twisting on the side and General Pasha sending tweets or messages from the court, whatever, right? But what we see here is, so what was the reason? Why have we denied consular access?
Because he was registered within the boundaries of Pakistan.
None of you know. 2000. All right, Khaled Jalani. First was actually done research on this. Go ahead.
Yeah, so in 2008, India and Pakistan signed a bilateral agreement on consular relations, and it was basically like there would be an exception for contracts in the case that the case is on political or security merits, and in which like the host country would decide on.
So there was, thank you very much. There was an agreement that we signed in 2008. India with open eyes, Pakistan with half open eyes. enter into this agreement, all right? And we said a bunch of things in this, that if fishermen are caught, we'll give timely access and we'll help each other. We'll create a judicial committee of retired judges who go and see each other's prisoners in different jails and go. And one of the clauses, was it clause 6, clause 5? 6, which says that arrest or detention made on political or security grounds, it is the discretion of either state to give consular access. Now this goes in violation of the Vienna Convention on Consular Relations, which doesn't have any exception. But now we've created exceptions. So it's on the basis of this 2008 agreement that we denied consular access. But had that not existed, we signing the Vienna Convention voluntarily diluted or allowed outside powers to access their citizens. And we give it through our own consent, and we've done it in almost all cases. The Indians have done it as well in most cases. It's just in this particular one we don't do it. So that's an issue of how sovereignty is impacted. So it's basically a shield. There's some benefits to having this system. For example, we're a state built on a particular ideology. We're an Islamic state, right? If we were bound to follow everything that an outside community was creating, not necessarily Islamic principles, would we be able to live the way we want to live, or why Pakistan was created? Not necessarily, it wouldn't have been possible. Because, so what sovereignty does is, it shields you from certain aspects of international law. The problem is it also cuts both ways. It can shield you from some of the good things, for example, human rights guarantees. A lot of times what we say is, and we use this as a bad excuse, is we say that we will apply human rights subject to our constitution and the injunctions of the Quran and Sunnah. The injunctions of Quran and Sunnah will not create a problem, right? Your constitution will not really create a problem, but if you want to create problems, if you want to, arbitrarily impose the death penalty, you can do that. And you can use Islam for it if you want. Or you can use whatever provisions of domestic terrorism law that you want. It's all about how you use these things, right? So sovereignty can be used as a beneficial shield, or it can be used as a negative form as well. Okay? So international obligations can impact you in different ways, and it really matters on the state. But there's a lot of pressure that works. When we talk about international law, we also discuss, and international relations people will have a better idea of this, that the law is one thing, but the pressure or the soft power that countries can project and the pressure that they can impose is often far more valuable than having a legal document saying we need to do this. There is a legal document which says there should be a plebiscite in Kashmir. Have we had a plebiscite in Kashmir? No. So it's the ability of Pakistan to pressurize India that will actually get some form of plebiscite, if any at all. Any questions thus far? Can we move on? Okay, so now it's really interesting in this debate of sovereignty and international relations to look and compare the international regime with a domestic national legal system. And what are some very basic characteristics of a national legal system? The first is there's the legislature, the three arms of the state, legislature, executive and judiciary. Right, we're clear on that. The trichotomy of powers and all that. So the legislature is involved in lawmaking. Again, pretty simple. The judiciary is involved in law determination and interpretation. It applies the law, looks at different situations, generally phrased law is then applied to specific situations. And then finally you have the executive, which is involved in law enforcement. It administers the law. It enforces it, makes sure that it actually takes place, it executes the law as the name suggests. And importantly, there's a state monopoly on violence. Domestically, only the state is allowed to exercise lawful authority through means of violence, as in they can arrest you by force, or if you're resisting arrest, they can shoot at you, or if you're shooting someone and committing an unlawful act, they can shoot directly. Right? So violence is an attribute of the state and it has a monopoly. If anyone else uses violence, they are violating the law and they can be prosecuted for that. We're clear on this?
So it says here legitimate violence. What about illegitimate violence?
Even the state can't do that.
The state?
Yes, so illegitimate violence is a police officer, the Karachi Rangers case, where a police officer randomly shot, not randomly, they picked up a car phone, phone thief or something like that, mobile thief, and they shot him there, and there was a video made of it.
Yeah.
Black Lives Matter in America.
Yeah, exactly. So unlawfully, there's a bit of an issue because the police officers say that we have been given this much authority. The problem is